very much, Maya, for this analysis of contemporary precarity, which is quite difficult for Slovenia, of course, but I'm sure for any other context as well. So now is the time for discussion. I would like to invite you to comment, to ask questions to our three speakers. Please don't be shy. We have a microphone, so I would like to ask you to speak in the microphone. You can ask either in Slovenian or in English. We have translation, so who would like to ask or comment first? Okay, since you're warming up, I have a question. I have a question for... Yeah, somebody has to be first, so I'm going to be the victim of that. I have a question for Mr. Husson. I would like to ask you regarding the reduction of the working time, which you proposed or which you outlined as one of the possible solutions for the future. And at the same time you said that the working time or the part-time engagements are already increasing. So is this already a sign that things are going that way into a solution, or is that a side effect of austerity still? Yes, sure.
Yeah. Anyway, unemployment is a way of reducing the working time and part-time too. But the reduction in working time I think of is a general reduction in working time. I think it's the main solution in let's say in Europe. It's the development of unemployment is the cause of the development of unemployment is a reduction of working time, which is not enough to create jobs compensating the gains of productivity. And the balance in Europe is what is not given in terms of reduction of working time is going to the actioneers, to the finance. That means that unemployment is the other side of the development in finance. And if you want to reduce unemployment, you have to reduce finance and reorganize society, create jobs by a reduction in working time. And the other way of fighting really deeply against unemployment is the creation of public jobs to satisfy social needs, and that's a quick answer.
Thank you very much. Is there now already a brave person in the audience to comment? Great.
My name is Nina, and I have a question for Mr. Standing. So you were saying that the Precariat, the new massive class, has this precarious mind. And now my question is that if we have this precarious passive mind, what is then the turning point that brings us to the streets and transforms our passive bodies into like bodies that struggle and that mobilize? Because, for example, in Slovenia, yes, we do have protests once in a while, but then we return to our everyday lives and then we remain passive. Thank you.
I'd like to answer it at the same time as refer to the previous question. I think the old labourist approach to working time would be to introduce regulations to limit working time hours. That was the old French system of 35-hour week, etc., etc. What we know is that actually French workers on average are now working longer than they used to. It's an irony of the outcome of that law. The Precariat approach would be to say what we really need is a stronger sense of control over our own time. The stronger sense of a capacity to refuse to be exploited if we have control. Then we can make a more mature bargain on the labour market. Only if we have a sense of a strategy for the decommodification of labour power, the decommodification of ourselves, will we have a progressive agenda. And that's why one of the major reasons why I favor moving towards a basic income. Because a basic income enables people to have a sense of control over their time. And then I can make a bargain. If I want to work 60 hours of labor a week, if I'm doing so from a position of strength, and you are prepared to pay me enough, no problem. If not, I'll work 20 hours. But unless you have control over your own time, you can't keep the regulations. And that is one of the reasons why I would strongly favor people like you and me supporting a slow time movement. A slow time movement where we say, wait a minute, let's slow down. Economic growth may be good for capitalism, but if it means putting more and more people into low-wage jobs that lead nowhere, then that's not growth for the human condition. So I think we need to think of it strategically, and when you come with your anger, and I come with my anger, we have to go into the streets demanding certain types of change. And I think that is the critical part of going forward in that regard.
I'm one of representatives of precarious workers in Slovenia. I don't consider myself as passive precarious, but active precariat, because we formed a union even. But in a global sense, how to become as a precarious worker or a group of precarious workers a relevant negotiator? Because we are affected by every law that is being accepted now, but we are never asked about it. We are not relevant negotiators, which the mainstream unions are, but they don't represent us.
I think you've put your finger on the problem. We know that labor unions have not reached out to the precariat. Now they know they have to do that. They must reform themselves. But there are many types of organization of the precariat that you represent that are growing around the world. I work with one, which has now 2 million members. It's the SEWA, which consists of women outworkers, women in the Indian precariat. That is bargaining with the state. It's bargaining with the middlemen, the mediators. It's bargaining with the agencies of the state. And it's bargaining with employers. And most importantly, possibly, it's bargaining with other occupational groups. In other words, if you're a nurse or an auxiliary, some of the most powerful exploiters of you are the doctors and the surgeon. We need a strategy where we're bargaining for our interests with all the groups that represent interests opposed to us. And I think that is a different mindset, but it is developing. And I would urge everybody to join your movement, because that is what we need.
Aha, v redu. Gospoda Senega bi rad vprašal, kaj on misli o korelaciji med odtujenostjo ljudi, vsej splošno odtujenostjo, in med spodbujanjem tekvalnosti med otroci že. Kako to vpliva na nastanek prekariata? Drugo, kar bi vprašal gospod Breznikovo, kaj ona misli o študentskih servisih, kot o privatnih agencijah za zaposlovanje. Hvala lepa.
Well, in student work, when Goran Lukic can answer you more profoundly. Student work is, the particularity in Slovenia is the use of student work. So young people are study in order to be able to work. So young people are studying, enter the university only in order to be able to work, not to study. And according to the statistics, as I know, every third student in Slovenia work 24 hours per week. So many regular jobs are performed by students, as we can see them in the supermarkets during the week and during the weekend at restaurants, bars, and so on. If we would replace the hours that students performed, we would get 20,000 regular jobs with salaries, social contributions paid, and so on. In the last year, we got a new regulation which introduced bigger taxes on the student work, and one irony is that a part of this money goes to the scholarships for the students. So the students can get scholarships to study on the basis of their own labor. And I think it is very, very wrong.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think you have identified one of the worst sicknesses in this commodified society. We are pushing for competitiveness in every aspect of life, and nothing is worse than the commodification of the educational system that is systematic part of globalization and the neoliberal agenda. We see it in the commercialization of secondary schooling, in primary schooling, in tertiary education, where we're expected to produce three commodities. The first commodity are diplomas and degrees. We mass produce them. The second are graduates. We mass produce them. And the third is academics ourselves, where we're expected to be graded, commodified, chase research grants, endlessly behave like Pavlovian dogs responding to the market signals. It is a genuine sickness that goes with the erosion of all cultural senses of education. Hegel put it beautifully when he said the whole purpose of education is to liberalize the subversive mind. But if you want to spend your time learning history or learning culture or learning ethics and philosophy, you won't improve your human capital. So the first task is to rescue the education system for the educators and for the students of tomorrow. Because we will not have a progressive generation if they're not learning those vital subversive subjects. And at the moment, the commercial interests that dominate our education are winning. But they shouldn't be allowed to win. On the way here, I read an OECD report on Slovenia. And I really wanted to tear the paper up and throw it as far as I could, because it was advocating more privatization of Slovenian education. It was advocating making all education responsible to business and employers, and turning vocational training and education into the preparation for jobs. And I said, where have I heard this agenda before? We must stand up and say off to such policies. Sorry to be blunt. Thank you.
I have a question concerning the concept of precariat. You said that there is a difference between precariat and proletariat. It has the traditional working class, but isn't the precariat just a new description of conditions in which a working class or traditional working class is facing?
That of course is the traditional Marxist perspective in a sense. And I've had lots of debates with the Socialist Workers' Party in Great Britain on this one. I think it's not useful to adhere to the old class terminology, partly for practical political reasons. It doesn't capture the imagery and the imagination of today's generations. And that's an important reason for changing the vocabulary, as long as one does not lose one's sense of dialectics and one's sense of understanding the importance of struggle and relations of production. But I hope, and when you read my book, I hope you will see that what I'm saying is that actually there are unique features of the precariat that do not correspond to the proletariat. And one of the features of the process of proletarianization was habituating the majority of people to stable labor. For the precariat, the state is trying to habituate people to a life of unstable labor and a life in which you are exploited outside the labor relation as much as inside it. The old proletariat had a consciousness of labor, wanting to have secure labor and the rewards of labor. That was the problem with the Leninist model and with the social democratic model, even in Sweden in the 20th century. It tied all entitlements to the performance of labor, not to being a human being. And you don't capture the language of the denizens and the erosion of rights if you take the traditional proletariat perspective. I have a lot of sympathy with the classic Marxian framework in the sense that it gives you the instruments of analysis. But when it comes to understanding the class dynamics, the old two-class model just does not capture the critical issues of the 21st century and global transformation. I could give you a much longer answer than that, but I think it's important that we escape from old ways of thinking at this stage.
I would like to refer to what Ms. Helena said or asked about unionization of precarious workers. I know this problem because I was working with self-employed people, and I must say that in Slovenian legislation, self-employed people are not workers, as Maja Breznik wrote on her slide, but they are employers. So they are not workers, but they are employers. And as employers, they are not entitled to unionize. And I must say that in Slovenia, the labor law defines worker by the possession of labor contract. So everybody who does not have labor contract is not a worker. Thank you.
Sorry, sorry to be the one to respond. I think you've put your finger on one of the key problems of laborism. I worked in the International Labour Organization for many years, and they always resisted any organization that was not a labor union being part of the governance of the ILO. And the reason was that you don't have a direct relation as a subordinated laborer to capital. And we know that the precariat does not have that direct relationship. It's often subject to triangulation and all the phenomenon that that represents. And what is exciting about the new precariat movements is that they are going round that and are saying that we must bargain for our interests against the state, against capital, the state, other occupational groups. And that is something that the unions, the traditional unions, find very difficult to accept. Now, when I was working with SEWA first, the labour unions, the International Labour Secretariats, your lot, were fiercely against recognising SEWA. And I was with many of their women leaders when they would be crying, because the unions were the ones saying out. But these are representing the most insecure groups in society, facing the worst forms of exploitation and degradation, and the unions were opposing them. This was a profoundly disturbing situation. And today the Precariat movements are actually speaking up against the deprivation of rights, against agencies operating on behalf of the state. And I think that's what makes them so radical and why we must all join them.
Precarious worker, obviously. Question for Professor Standing, I suppose. The universal basic income, the best thing since sliced bread, I agree with that. However, one of the most common objections is that could inevitably would become a measure that will be co-opted by the neoliberal elites. So basically, it would be a measure by which the neoliberal elites would sedate everyone, pretty much, by giving them free money, with which they would buy all the junk produced by the large corporations. Now, I think there are measures that could prevent that from happening. I would like to hear them from you.
I apologise for being the one to answer again, but I think you should feel more optimistic. We know, we formed an organisation, and I please ask all of you to join because we need everybody to join. It's called BIEN, Basic Income Earth Network. And we've been through many, many arguments thrown against having a basic income over the years, and I hope our documentation answers this question more than I can do in a brief moment. But the research by psychologists, in particular, show that if people have a basic security, if they have basic income security, they are more likely, not less likely, they are more likely to participate in actions of collective struggle. They are more likely to be tolerant of others, be it migrants, be it whatever. They are more likely, much more likely, to be altruistic, in the sense that they will feel a sense of empathy towards other people and a sense of solidarity with their needs as well as their own. Basic security is a fundamental need if we are to be progressive. And that is so vitally important to understand. But your question is, what else do you need? And I've tried to answer it in the short form, and I do it in the books, and I have a few available if anybody's interested, which says that we need voice. Without voice, without collective institutions, organizations to represent us, we will always be vulnerable, whatever the system. We need to belong to groups of collective representation. And we need a whole lot of other things that go with it, and I try to list those things, but without a basic income, none of those things will work either. And that's why it's so vitally important to have it as a central part, not the only part, as a central part of a new progressive agenda.
Thank you. The question is both for Standing and Hussam. The question is about, you talk a lot about voice, and I see a lot of governments who actually employ the strategy of exit, meaning allowing people who would be the potential voice to exit. And actually it becomes even a sort of a mantra at the EU level, you know, oh, if you don't find a job at home, then go out and you know, find a work. If you cannot find it in Greece, find it in Germany. How that stands? You had two of you had a really impressive presentations, but how that stands with the issues that you raised, because I see it more and more, especially not only in Eastern and Southern Europe, as a way governments to kick out everybody who will have a voice and you know, keep comfortably ruling with the support of the precariat that you just explained.
They say there are two different problems. The first one is the internal migration from Greece or from to other countries, which economic reasons, but it corresponds to one of the tools of the liberal Europe is the competition between workers in an open space, and it is a way to have a stronger pressures on the general condition of the working class from in each country. For instance, there are many problems in terms of social regulation on what it was the famous Bolkestein directive, the idea of letting people working in one country with the social condition of the own country, which is a way of make a pressure, and the idea is to have a general bon, I can't express it in English, en français, c'est d'aligner sur les conditions de tout. No. Align on the worst conditions.
I think voice is against exit, Albert Hirschman's classic dichotomy. I think we need to increase our capacity to exit, in a sense. But there gets a point where the state trying to get you and me to exit is all very well if there are just a few of us, and you can be encouraged to emigrate to some other place. But we're getting to the point where there's a critical mass, and not so many people, that the Precariat and the people who think they could become part of the Precariat are actually almost becoming a majority. And that is something fundamentally new. And we have a lot of lessons to learn from Beppe Grillo's five-star movement in Italy. In a sense, for the first time, it mobilized enough of the first part of the Precariat and the third part of the Precariat to reject the old political establishments. It is not a progressive force, it's a populist force, but it's destroyed the structures. It's destroyed those old comfort zones of that political establishment. And it's a wonderful wake-up call for progressives. Because if the left, the PD, could not win in Italy in 2013, it says that the left is bankrupt. And that is a powerful message which is going to be telling a lot of young politicians, don't go in that direction. Join something else. And I think that is an exciting potential moment. It's not, we don't want to be deterministic, but it is an exciting moment of a transformation when people start seeing that the old models don't work, something new is needed.
Prosil bi za slušalko, no? Thank you. Rad bi vprašal, verjetno ne poznate podrobnosti zakona oziroma predlog zakona o malem delu v Sloveniji. Bi pa prosil pri vašem mnenju, ali ta zadeva dejansko prispeva tistemu, kar vi pravite basic income pa basic security. Rešitve iz tega zakona, po mojem mnenju, dejansko točev popolnoma, bo rekel, kontrasmer. In ko ste menjali tale izraz denizem, jaz mislim, da se s tem pojavom dnevno srečujemo. Tako da, hvala lepa.
Lahko par besed o malem delu, ker gospoda morda ne poznam. Par besed samo.
Malo delo se nanašalo na tega omejitve delo do nekaj mesecev, ni regresa, ni zavarovanja, skratka izplačilo bo neko direktno roko in take stvari. Tako da mislim, da bi Goran tam iz prve vrste lahko to bolj razložil.
This is extension of student work with no security to also to older generation, because it is now a problem with the elder person whose pensions are below the poverty rate. So they are giving them the opportunity to do little work, so to earn some more extra money to reach poverty, to go beyond the poverty rate.
This is it's a good example of the structural reforms. Maybe it's a point of debate on. There are protection laws, they are destroying them, and there are also, for instance, in France, basic income, there are benefits, there are social benefits, there are minimum income, the RSA. So it exists in such a form. The problem is that it is going to be destroyed. The problem is the conditionality, which it's an obstacle, which I agree with this idea of a conditionality. But the other problem is that, for instance, this minimum income can take its place in a neoliberal program, because it's the way to guarantee a minimum way of life, and all the problem of a basic income is its level. If it is enough to live in decent conditions, it is only a way to prevent revolution or very strong social movements. And the question, the problem of a level, and if it's a high level, the problem of financing it, and I discussed the project of financement of the basic income. It's maybe I don't know all the arguments, but in France, the proposals were in fact to reduce social security to finance a basic income. I don't think it's a correct. We have to. Okay, you probably have arguments, but there are the points of the debate. First, the opposition, which is, for instance, I was as an activist in an unemployed people movement in France. There was this debate between what they call the old-time laborists, which we want to make us new slaves of capitalism, and the people who said we want to live outside the capitalist world. We want an income, and there was an opposition which is still strong in some part of these movements between the one who demand jobs and the one who demand income. We think that we have to combine these two problems, because the ideal society is not a society, I think, with a part of a society living on the basic income, and the other one living on wages. The ideal society, I would say, is it was a theme in France about the reduction of working time, is work less and work all, and unify the condition. And on this, from this point of view, it's not old time. The problem is capitalism today is working like in the old times, and it's not a surprise that we have to rethink our way of thinking the capitalist, like in the old times in the 19th century capitalism. It's the barbarous capitalism, we can have a debate. We are not disagreement, total disagreement on the analysis, and but for instance, in France, a left-wing program must combine the reduction. All the progressive people are on the line of a reduction of working time to 32 hours. And for instance, in France, during the 35 hours period, there has been a creation of almost 2 million jobs. And the right-wing people say it was an error, a terrible failure, etc. But there has been a creation of jobs. There could have been more. There could have been more control of the condition of the reduction of working time. But it's a positive experience. And historically, if the people, the wage earners work 40 hours by week during time and time, you are creating precariat. You are taking people who work and the people we can't work. We can't work in a wage relationship. And so the idea is to combine this idea of reduction of working time and guaranteed income, but with a supplementary idea is a decommodification. And for instance, I give one example. Excuse me. Okay. For instance, the idea is the free distribution, the free supplies of to respond to social needs. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean the mini jobs. You're talking about mini jobs. Germany pioneered it. Britain is doing it. A lot of countries are doing it. All they're doing is multiplying subsidized labor, and this is eventually a subsidy to capital, and pushing more and more people into precariatized existence, and in the end it will only build up the number of people who will support the precariat. I think we've got to treat jobs as instrumental. I take my job, I do it. I don't expect happiness or wonderful wealth from my job. We have to think of other ways of supplementing the income, because wages will continue to fall for a majority of people in our countries. That doesn't mean that living standards of workers will fall or should fall, but we have to have more of that financial capital to distribute. We have to turn the mountain of subsidies that are given at the moment to capital. We have to get those incorporated back in the state for redistribution to the people in the precariat and those around it. We have to think out of the imagination of the old social democratic model. And I think that is very difficult. But it is something we have to do at this stage of history. And I think that's very exciting. And I wish I was 21 and a student, because I know where my voice would be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We are going to end this session now.